the shadows, the city hides its secrets. Whispers of the lost echo where no one dares to look. Every story begins with a question. But not every secret wants to be found.
This case isn't famous because it's unsolved. It's famous because someone made sure it stayed that way. In 1947, Los Angeles discovered a body, but what it really buried was the truth. Her name was Elizabeth Short. You've heard the nickname. You've seen the headlines. You've watched documentaries that promise answers and deliver speculation. But tonight, we're not asking who killed the Black Dahlia. We're asking something far more dangerous. Why was justice never allowed to happen? Because when you slow this case down, when you strip away the sensationalism, a disturbing pattern emerges. Evidence mishandled, leads ignored, powerful names hovering just out of reach. This isn't just a murder mystery. It's a story about silence. This is silence of the truth. And once you see what was silenced, you won't unsee it. Before she became the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short was simply a young woman trying to survive in a world that offered her very little protection. She was born in 1924, during a time when survival itself required resilience. Her childhood was marked by instability. Her father disappeared from her life, leaving her mother to raise 5 daughters alone during the Great Depression. From early on, Elizabeth learned what it meant to live without certainty. She struggled with health issues. She moved between relatives. She learned how to rely on others, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. Friends describe her as gentle, quiet, polite, someone who tried to stay hopeful even when circumstances didn't justify it. And like so many young women of her era, Elizabeth believed Hollywood represented opportunity. But Hollywood did not welcome women like Elizabeth. It welcomed connections, power, influence. Elizabeth arrived with none of those things. She lived temporarily with acquaintances, stayed in short-term accommodations, and moved frequently, not because she was careless, but because stability was a luxury she couldn't afford. And vulnerability in a city like Los Angeles can be dangerous, because when someone has no fixed address, no consistent routine, and no one checking in regularly, they become easy to overlook and even easier to exploit. If you believe stories should focus on victims, not spectacle, subscribe to Silence of the Truth. Los Angeles in the 1940s was booming. The war was ending. The film industry was thriving. Studios controlled careers, reputations, and sometimes lives. Power operated behind closed doors. Women were disposable. If you didn't fit the image, if you didn't have protection, you were replaceable. Elizabeth drifted through this environment largely unnoticed. She wasn't a star. She wasn't even close. She was one of thousands of hopefuls chasing a future that never arrived. Witnesses later recalled seeing her in cafes, hotel lobbies, bus stations, always passing through, always between places. This transit existence would later become one of the biggest obstacles in the investigation, because solving a crime requires patterns. And Elizabeth's life, shaped by instability, left very few, which raises a critical question. Was the person who harmed her someone who understood that invisibility? Someone who knew that if Elizabeth disappeared, the world wouldn't immediately notice? On January 15th, 1947, a woman walking with her child noticed something unusual in a vacant lot in Los Angeles. At first, it didn't register as real. Police were called. Reporters followed. And before investigators had fully processed the scene, the media had already seized control of the narrative. Elizabeth Short's death shocked the city, but it was a coverage that transformed the case into a phenomenon. Newspapers coined the name the Black Dahlia, a nickname that would forever overshadow Elizabeth's real identity. From that moment on, she was no longer a person. She was a headline, and headlines demand drama. Details were exaggerated. Speculation filled gaps. Rumors were printed as fact. The media didn't just report the crime, it reshaped it. And in doing so, it complicated everything. The LAPD launched one of the largest investigations in its history. Over 150 suspects were considered. Tips poured in from across the country. Confessions arrived, many of them false. The problem wasn't a lack of information. It was too much of it. Evidence handling in the 1940s was inconsistent. Scenes were compromised. Information leaked. Journalists interfered directly with police work. Some newspapers even contacted Elizabeth's mother under false pretenses, claiming her daughter had won a contest, just to extract personal details. This wasn't just incompetence, it was exploitation. And in the chaos, the most important thing slipped away: clarity. Soon after the murder, letters began arriving at newsrooms. Some included personal items believed to belong to Elizabeth. The tone was unsettling, detached, almost mocking. Were these communications genuine, or carefully crafted distractions designed to mislead investigators? Experts still disagree, but one detail is impossible to ignore. The letters stopped, not gradually, abruptly. No escalation, no follow-up, no attempt to maintain attention. Almost as if the purpose had been fulfilled. That silence speaks volumes. Dozens of suspects came and went. Some were cleared, some were forgotten. But one individual lingered in the background of the case for decades. A man with money, connections, education, and a lifestyle that raised quiet concerns. Circumstantial evidence surrounded him. Friends whispered. Investigators hesitated. But proving guilt requires more than suspicion. Witnesses were unreliable. Evidence was indirect. And legal standards demanded certainty. So the case stalled, not with answers, but with silence. If you're still watching, you're already questioning what most people accept. Subscribe to Silence of the Truth. Decades later, the case was reopened by independent researchers. Books were written. New accusations surfaced. Family members made claims. But every new theory created new contradictions. Some explained the letters. Others explained the staging. None explained everything, which leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. Maybe the Black Dahlia case isn't unsolved because it lacks answers. Maybe it's unsolved because the truth disrupts too many narratives. This wasn't random. The level of control suggests familiarity, with procedure, with planning, with consequence. This wasn't impulsive violence. It was deliberate. And deliberate acts often come from people who believe they won't face consequences. People insulated by status, intelligence, or power. That possibility is unsettling because it suggests the killer didn't disappear. They blended in. The Black Dahlia case haunts us because it represents something bigger than one crime. It exposes how systems fail the vulnerable, how media can distort truth, how power can protect silence. Elizabeth Short didn't just lose her life. She lost her voice. And this case remains open because that voice was never restored. Elizabeth Short deserved dignity. She deserved justice. And she deserved to be remembered as more than a nickname. This case isn't just unsolved. It's unfinished. And as long as stories like this are told, carefully, respectfully, and without exploitation, silence never fully wins. If you believe truth matters more than comfort, subscribe to Silence of the Truth, because some secrets don't scream. They wait